Let me ask you something. What do you think of when you think about the beloved 1983 holiday classic, A Christmas Story? Is it something like this?
It just wouldn't be the holidays without 24 hours of A Christmas Story. So we're doing it again. Watch it again. Watch it again. Watch it again.
Stop, please. Let's quit. We get it. Okay, we get it. That's enough.
On a Motorola C139 with texting, games, and graphics.
Shush! It's a pretty accurate image of A Christmas Story's place in the public consciousness nowadays. It's one of the most saturated pieces of media, ever. Most media will just come and go, explode for a couple months, racking up a ludicrous amount of money, like a shotgun firing coins. It'll sell a bunch of merch, get a couple commercial deals. Don't forget the memes. The ones that stick around beyond that run cycle are typically highly marketable mega franchises, like Star Wars, Minions, and that's it. But like the flu, A Christmas Story rides this media toilet spiral every year, despite the franchise only having one hit film, and even that's debatable. The marketing around it even revels in the fact that it's just the same obnoxious garbage being shilled year after year.
A Christmas Story. Over and over again. Continues next on TBS.
All the merchandise is just the same bunnies and legs, yet this warrants a dedicated primetime time slot? Which primetime? All of them! A hotel and museum? Christ, enough already. I'm surprised Ralphie isn't a confirmed Smash DLC character. We've already got representatives for Arbor Day and Mardi Gras, why not throw in Christmas? His final Smash is shooting you. With a gun. All of this saturation has led to a major backlash in the past couple years.
But I'm here to tell you why A Christmas Story, despite its title, is a terrible Christmas movie. Reason number one, A Christmas Story is all about consumerism.
I think she's the real Yahoo here, you know what I'm saying? But from what I can tell, most of the allegations levied against this movie boil down to overplayed. And as much as music critics would like it to be, overplayed is not a legitimate criticism of a work. It has nothing to do with the work itself. But, I don't know, maybe it does here. I mean, it's hard to enjoy a movie about appreciating small things when it's blown up to be this huge thing. This titanic, absolutely leviathan thing, sitting in a pool of tacky knickknacks in its own spunk. I could see that argument having ground here, where normally it wouldn't. But I really love this movie. I used to watch it on VHS when I was a wee lad, marathon notwithstanding. And it hurts me a bit to see the world turning against my only child.
Daddy's gonna kill Ralphie!
Yes.
So it leads me to ask, how did we get here? How did we fall so far from God's light? Well, to answer that, let's open this Christmas story up to the prologue and see where it all began. A Christmas Story doesn't begin with a movie or even a book. It begins with a man, a simple radio talk show host by the name of Gene Shepard.
What? We're on the air.
So this guy was basically the first YouTuber. Gene Shepard was an incredibly impassioned storyteller. He was a man who just loved to tell stories, and he had the linguistic ability to make them as savory as a rare sirloin.
There ain't nothing that will teach you about life quicker, more conclusively, more deeply, more solidly than to have a good paper route for a while, right at the very most plastic period of your life.
He can make the most mundane of activities sound like the storming of Normandy Beach. Most of his stories just consisted of simple anecdotes on his childhood, on his perception of society, or basically just whatever he wanted to frame a story around. I kind of made a dumb joke about him being a YouTuber earlier, but he really did appeal to that same audience that literally every podcast or Let's Play does today. Except, you know, he was interesting. He was a pioneer in that type of entertainment. His bread and butter was his delivery. He has this soft, reverberant tone to his voice that sounds like Grandpa reading books around a fire.
She quavered. I think there's a dead man in there. Her upper plate was flapping like a kite in a stiff breeze. I looked in the car, and sure enough, leaning against the wheel was a sickly, green-looking corpse, apparently.
It allows you to follow him on this road as he naturally guides you from one topic to another, taking natural digressions and always getting back to a main point. He had a way of layering narrative upon narrative in one simple story in a way that revealed deep themes and messages through heartwarming stories. A romp through childhood about being a paperboy could also have a subtle sub-story about a habitually drunken paper captain unsatisfied with his life, without ever letting the tragedy of that overtake the tone of the story.
Julian!
He was an expert in disguising complexity behind simplicity, and so listeners connected with him. Also, this guy was an absolute madman. He started a counterculture revolving around art and integrity over avarice or literally anything else. The story was all that mattered to him. He called his listeners night people. Maybe come up with a better name there, guy. They were led to be dedicated to the cause of storytelling, just like him. No, I'm serious. Shepard only cared about getting his story out there. Profit and marketing be damned. His radio career almost didn't happen because he wouldn't shut the hell up. Dude was a disc jockey. He was supposed to flip records, but he just kept talking. He got fired 3 times. His buddy Shel Silverstein, you know, the terrifying egg person on the back of the Tree book, he convinced Shepard to start writing his ideas. Why not? Who cares? As long as it's out there, right? Yes, but Egg Boy, I have no place to publish my writings. Oh, I know. I'll just publish them in the raunchiest publication in town. What? John Cassette Tape? You want to make Shadows, an avant-garde movie about race relations that you can't get studio funding for because this is the 1950s? Well, here, I'll just have the Night People crowdfund it, and now it's in the Criterion Collection. By the way, I'm sorry about these little words scrolling at the bottom of some of these interview clips I'm using. In researching for this video, I found this Web 2.0 looking ass website called shepdocumentary.com. It's apparently a site that collects information on Gene Shepard to use in a documentary. It's being directed and produced by this guy, Nick Mantis, the proud cinematographer of Woo Life. The documentary doesn't really exist in full, mostly because... By the way, Nick, baby, if you're watching this, I'd love to help out with this project in any way that I can. Maybe I could help you out with some of that miking.
Yeah, fine, no problem, okay, we go.
But I swear to God, if you pull a Daddy Derek on me for using your footage, I'm gonna come up there and punch you in your face. Notice how, despite his failure to secure funding, Nick Mantis has not given up on this project. He's still making progress on this, still getting new clips, still trying hard to get his story out there. That's the kind of inspiration that Gene Shepard put into people. His words could cool your stressed soul, as well as light a fire of inspiration in your heart to go out and make your story. And it just so happened to light that same fire in the next guy on our list, Bob Clark. Bob Clark was an aspiring director with a dream to one day make a beloved classic, Baby Geniuses 2. Super babies. One night in the 1960s, he was bumping around rural Indiana looking for trouble, as one does, when suddenly he heard a familiar soft voice coming through his radio, telling a familiar story about a child getting triple dog dared into a lifetime of disfigurement by licking a telephone pole. Bob Clark was immediately struck with inspiration. This would make for a great bumper! And again. Clark knew from the moment he had heard Gene Shepard's stories that he needed to make a movie out of them. This revelation was well before he had any successful movies under his belt. At that time, he was just making niche horror movies like Death Dream. More like I Dream of Death. So he didn't really have notoriety to get funding for a movie that most studios would see as a gamble, until finally he had his first cinematic success. And that success was Porky's, a comedy about having sex with teenagers. Porky's was pretty successful for a movie that focused on freckled underage ding-dongs, grossing $200 million in the box office. Emphasis on gross. Now Clark had bargaining power with studios. In exchange for Porky's 2, Porkier, Bob Clark was finally able to secure funding for his dream project. How truly ironic. Gene Shepard, not once, but twice, was only able to publish his wholesome, grounded stories through the lens of the dirtiest smut imaginable. And it was here, in this ocean of sexy bunnies and curiously marked wieners, that A Christmas Story was born, and it soon became the classic we all know and love today. It didn't really start that way, though. It had a goddamn stroke in the box office. I mean, it didn't bomb or anything. It made its money back. Let's just say the catering on set was sponsored by the Dollar Menu, if you catch my drift. It only made $20 million, which is still more money than I'll ever see in my life. Fuck this gay earth. And it got obliterated by critics. Just take a look at this review they have on the Christmas Story House website by Rex Reed.
Excited.
I'd call A Christmas Story opening today Hollywood's way of rushing the season. My guy, you have no idea. A Christmas Story wasn't even still in theaters to be played on Christmas that year. That would be the last time that would happen. And now, after all this time, we can finally talk about the movie in question. A Christmas Story was the ultimate culmination of what Gene Shepard stood for. It was basically everything that his stories were on the radio brought to life on the big screen. It told one major story, but it wasn't afraid to venture off into tangents and digressions, and in Shepard's signature style, the film would bring the viewer right back to the story without ever making it feel like they left. It was the perfect remembrance of childhood through the lens of adulthood. Everything in the film is from the point of view of a grown-up Ralphie remembering the experiences you're seeing. Everything has this glossy, rosy saturation to it that makes it feel like it's a memory. Adult Ralphie knows that his parents were having marital issues. Adult Ralphie knows that his actions were flawed and that he deserved to be punished. Adult Ralphie can see all of the subtle storytelling that we can, but it's not the focus. He's letting himself indulge in his childhood memories and putting himself in that mindset, allowing all the horrors of the world that he knows were happening at the time fade into his subconscious. You know, this movie's set in the 40s, World War II is happening, but it never shows up because why would it? Why would an adult reflecting on his favorite Christmas memories bring up a war? This story is Ralphie's escapism. It plays a lot of little things about childhood up for laughs. I mean, yeah, it's funny to think about your stupid friend getting his tongue stuck to a pole, or the terrible clothes that your aunt painstakingly stitched for you in a fit of misdirected adoration, or the silly scenarios you'd think up with your rampant prepubescent imagination. But it touches on all of these things with an understanding of how they added to the narrator's perception of the world. They were played for laughs, yeah, but they also revealed truth and heart. My favorite example to show this is near the end. See, the whole movie has been building up this consumerist, selfish message. The goal of this movie is to get this BB gun. It's what Ralph wants more than anything in the world. His desire for it consumes his mind, and this rampant avarice for stuff is subtly undercut at the end. Because what does Ralph remember this Christmas for? Is it the one where he got his favorite toy? No, it's the first one where they had Chinese turkey.
That Christmas would live in our memories as the Christmas when we were introduced to Chinese turkey. All was right with the world.
Adding the message that memories and love will always be more satisfying than material things, without beating you over the head with that message. So, in other words, this is basically the best Gene Shepard story that he's ever told. I mean, that is him. He's the narrator. Hey, let's take a look at that Rex Reed review again. First of all, the film is marred by the kind of ludicrous, pretentious narration that never allows you the luxury of figuring out what's going on. Oh, wow. Not since Joseph Anderson reviewed an entire genre has an opinion been so wrong. Gene Shepard's narration is the tasty pasty that holds this whole thing together.
Holy smokes, it was 6:45. Only one thing in the world could have dragged me away from the soft glow of electric sex gleaming in the window.
He speaks with unabashed sincerity the thoughts that a child would have, put into the more descriptively and linguistically pleasing terms that only an adult would use. His narration doesn't just state what's happening on screen, it adds a new layer to it, a new perspective on the events that isn't anywhere else.
Marcus, this crummy little toady, mean, rotten, his lips curled over his green teeth. Randy lay there like a slug. It was his only defense.
He paints a picture with his words more than the actual picture. Also, dude's a ham on legs. He's not just talking about childhood, he's making love to it. Wait, don't... FBI, open up! Listen to this lovable bastard.
Aha, the Bumpus Hounds, da-da-da-da-da-da! Our hillbilly neighbors, the Bumpuses, had at least 785 smelly hound dogs. And they ignored every other human being on Earth but my old man.
He's fully committed to this role. He even sings little ditties to himself to show his excitement. Have you ever heard someone actually sing a ditty to themselves? No. But radical Mr. Reed isn't without a point. There had to be some reason that the film didn't do too well in theaters. Even more perplexing, once it got released to home VHS, it started steadily bringing in more and more revenue. Why did that happen after it flopped in the theater? Well, if you haven't seen H. Bomberguy's cool and also good video on VHS and its relationship to media, Jim, what are you doing? Why have you seen this and not that? What's wrong with you? Do you not like joy? In that video, he talks about an effect that home releases had on more casual movie sales.
The smaller screen also changes the way we relate to the image and the people in it. Television can be more human, friendlier. Those little people on the screen are having a nice chat about current events and I feel somewhat included or informed. A talk show blown up to 70 feet staring down at you in a darkened room with surround sound blasting in your ears would be overpowering to say the least. And it turns out the aesthetic and design of some films are predisposed to mesh beautifully with the qualities of the television.
Well said, you beautiful British boy. Now get back to being a needless contrarian, you little rascal.
Like the fact I think the Star Wars prequels are actually pretty good.
What is your problem?
Just kidding, I'm actually a huge fan of H-Bomber Guy. At me on Twitter, baby. Suddenly, movies that didn't work blasting at you in IMAX 3D virtual reality started to gain a cult following. He uses Kevin James' Mallrats as an example, but I think an even better example is A Christmas Story. I can't even imagine watching A Christmas Story in a cold, dark theater, surrounded by strangers who have nothing better going on than watching A Christmas Story in theaters. Imagine that. This subdued, subtle, and personal display of childhood wouldn't work in an overbearing, loud, and publicly projected screen. Those quieter moments, the ones where Shepard is just talking to you about his childhood, those are so much more effective when you're in a place that feels like home, surrounded by the people that you love. Or in my case, a basement with rats that tolerate you living in their nests because your body is like a natural space heater. Hey, I'm just happy to have someone pretend to love me for once. So that's why I theorize it didn't do too well in box offices, because frankly, this movie doesn't work when it's loud and overbearing. Even though it was starting to gain some traction as a VHS release, that flop was it for MGM. The property was nothing but a waste of time and money to them. And then Turner Broadcasting sauntered I'm actually sauntering. I'm standing in the corner of this library sauntering. And then my guy Turner Broadcasting sauntered on over from across the bar, martini in hand, and was all like, "Hey baby, you got any movie licenses you ain't using?" "Yes, take it please!" And so there it was, this beautiful, unique property in the hands of actual Satan. I'm sorry, Turner Broadcasting. You know, that subsidiary of AT&T, everyone's favorite guy. Owner of such stand-up stations as TNT, TBS, Cartoon Network, and True TV. Yeah, I'm sure they would never ruin the artistic integrity of anything. Meanwhile, that VHS effect we discussed earlier, yeah, that was dropping into fourth gear. A Christmas Story was rising into greater and greater heights. People were so easily drawn into Shepard's narration, as they had been so many times before. People would put it on even if they were doing something else in the room, because the movie just oozed Christmas spirit. People would be drawn in whenever the music picked up and something funny was happening, and the movie had plenty of those moments.
Put your arms down when you get to school.
And then came the memes. He looks like a pink nightmare. Fragile. Oh, fudge.
Only I didn't say fudge.
Picking up on this, Turner did what it does best and capitalized on a trend way too hard. TNT and TBS slowly started airing it in primetime Christmas each year. It was aired 6 times over the 3 days around Christmas in 1995, 8 times in that same time period in 1996. That was a big deal at the time. It was unheard of for one broadcast to take up so much airtime. The poor, naive bastards. In 1997, TNT was like, wow, people really love this movie. And in an unprecedented stunt, aired it for 24 straight hours. And people tuned in for all 12 airings. This was just a stunt that didn't even expect it to work once, much less become an annual tradition, but there it was. You can't argue with results. And with that success, they started doing this nonsense every single year, and the rest is history. With each passing year, more and more people tuned in. New release formats came out, and each one got a version of A Christmas Story. This property was just ripe for merchandising, and merchandise they did. How much? Well, let's just take a little look-see at the gift shop section of the Christmas Story House and Museum, which the fact that that even exists is proof that God has decided we're not worth it anymore. Look at all these iconic images reduced to tacky plastic. You got your pink nightmares, you got your leg lamps, you got your National Lampoon's Christmas. That doesn't belong here, get that out of here. Hey, look, they're selling Ovaltine. Hey, it's just like that scene from the movie. The one where Ralph loves the Little Orphan Annie radio show so much that he's willing to stomach can after can of this liquid mercury monstrosity just to be a part of the story. And there's this tense scene of a mundane task as he slowly unpicks the message. This scene has a huge buildup. There's gotta be a big payoff. The tension keeps rising and rising until finally he decodes it just in time.
Yes. Be sure to drink your Ovaltine. Ovaltine? A crummy commercial?
Ding, ding, ding. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we found our analogy as to what ruined this movie. The thing that ruins A Christmas Story is the very fact that it feels like it's a crummy commercial. This warm, kind-hearted movie has inherent cognitive dissonance, being the poster of a cold, corporate, shameless media empire. One that capitalizes on a live show trend without stopping to think whether or not the source material translates well at all into an over-exaggerated, overproduced musical number. Or stopping to think about casting someone who could sing. One that merchandises the most iconic moments without any understanding of what made those moments iconic in the first place. Nah, you're right, the joke was Pinkman funny. It certainly had nothing to do with the relatability and family values presented with an aunt who puts her heart into ultimately unwanted gifts. Nah, it's too complex. It's Pinkman funny, ha ha ha! One that takes those iconic moments, turns them up to 11 to make this abysmal crock of shit. Oh, you thought I'd forgotten about this abomination onto everything Yuletide. Yeah, I bet you'd like it if I did forget about it, Warner. You know, the sequel that no one ever asked for that single-handedly shut down Turner Broadcasting's direct-to-DVD division. This cynical, consumerist nothing of a movie that serves as a perfect reflection of what A Christmas Story has become. It looks and sounds like the beloved story, but contains none of the heart, none of the substance, and only exists as a hollow shell of broken dreams that focuses only on surface-level memes and porky humor. All of this rampant avarice and clearly fake manufactured nonsense. Watch the movie, watch it over and 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 over again. Participate in our terrible sequels and reproductions. They got all the goofs from the original. Buy our stuff. Buy all of our stuff. Come to our hotel. Drink your crummy Ovaltine. It contradicts the very essence of the film that you're marketing. Okay, I need to calm down. I can't be getting overworked enough to trigger my asthma over a dumb seasonal movie. Look, I'm self-aware. I know what I'm about. I get that I'm overreacting to what ultimately isn't a big deal. But I don't know, man. This is just important to me. It burns me up inside when special, down-to-earth works like this get inflated to be this big and completely miss the point of something that I love. Like, look at this 2000 review from the late Roger Ebert. There are many small but perfect moments in A Christmas Story, and one of the best comes after Lifebuoy is finally removed from Ralphie's mouth and he is sent off to bed. His mother studies the bar, thinks for a moment, and then sticks it in her own mouth just to see what it tastes like. Moments like that are why some people watch A Christmas Story every holiday season. There's a real knowledge of human nature beneath the comedy. Wait, is that how Lifebuoy is spelled? I always thought it was B-O-I, like Lifebuoy. Mr. Ebert is right on the money. These tiny little human moments are what makes this movie so special, and there's something that just can't be mass marketed or put as the poster to a 24-hour marathon. Like where's the action figure for this moment? One with real soap-licking action. So yeah, this rampant unchecked consumerism and oversaturation that masks the human moments in this movie is the major flaw that ruins it for a lot of people. But I mean, duh, we went into this video kind of already knowing that. But why is this a problem with this specific movie? I mean, It's a Wonderful Life went through pretty much the same media cycle. It completely flopped in theaters, making it easy and cheap to acquire for television play, only then to grow into a film that gets an annual dedicated time slot in a summer condo in the American heart. But if you search for It's a Wonderful Life merchandise, the most you'll find is a t-shirt or throw pillow with quotes from the movie stitched into it. If that movie could come out of this media cycle squeaky clean, why exactly is it that A Christmas Story came out of it a filthy whore? What was the difference here? Well, as much as I hate to admit it, Yahoo McGooberface from earlier had something resembling a point. A Christmas Story does have a lot to do with consumerism and glorified violence and funny, goofy, over-the-top moments. This isn't a bad thing, and as we discussed earlier, these elements are ultimately undercut to reveal a more wholesome, anti-consumerist, and anti-violence message. But if you're not looking at it closely, as we established earlier that many people don't due to the VHS effect, then it's easy to see this movie as a bunch of memes and moments, easily marketable moments. A lot of people in my generation grew up just seeing those moments because they didn't care about the deeper story meaning when they were kids, and now that they're adults and can understand the deeper themes within the movie, they've seen it 100 times and they think they already know everything about it. They haven't gotten the chance to look at it through the lens of adulthood like Gene Shepard obviously wanted them to do. It's easy to forget that this was Gene Shepard's passion, his greatest work. He was a counterculture icon that made this movie just for the purpose of telling a good story. It's no wonder that mass marketing doesn't jive well with A Christmas Story. It was never built to sustain it. None of Gene Shepard's works were built to sustain a profit before art mindset. That's why no sequel or follow-up has worked. And not just A Christmas Story 2, let's just let history forget that garbage fire. But also there were a few little-known sequels that Shepard actually had input in. They were My Summer Story and Ollie Hoop Noodle's Haven of Bliss. Another zinger from the brain that brought you Night People. These movies didn't do too hot either. Yeah, part of that was because they were produced by other studios and couldn't legally be marketed as a direct successor.
You like jazz?
What's the matter with you? But there was also a shift in soul. It was no longer about Gene desperately trying to get his story out there. His story was already out. His piece de resistance was done. Now, it was all about trying to recapture that same money-making machine that he got before. It's sad to see how far Shepard fell from that man who got fired 3 times because he couldn't not tell his story. And that's A Christmas story in a nutshell. In and of itself is not a bad movie. It's a great movie, but it's simply not meant to be played for 24 hours, and it does not have the mass appeal to stand as a media empire while still keeping its integrity in the way that Star Wars can. Well, most of the time. Some of the time. Little Orphan Annie can't be blamed. It's the gallons and gallons of gross Ovaltine that you're forced to drink to partake in Little Orphan Annie that's the problem. Well, stop drinking the garbage. It's gross tin can chocolate milk, and it's really old by now. I asked on Twitter for people to tell me why they wouldn't like A Christmas Story, and nobody answered. Why do I even try? So how do we get this beautiful movie out of this slump? Well, the boob tube is on its way out now, with the advent of Netflix inspiring a whole multitude of streaming services that will basically replace television. I give it 8 years tops. I'll admit it, I'm a bit worried about the timing of this Christmas Story backlash lining up with this transitionary period. My beloved might get lost in the cracks. Then again, in the age of the internet, nothing disappears forever, and maybe it'll be good for this movie to spend some time out of the limelight. If we're lucky, maybe it'll re-enter that cult classic status if given enough time and relative obscurity, and maybe we'll once again be able to enjoy its little moments without all of the noise. Maybe we can finally feel at home with this treasured movie again, just like Gene Shepard always wanted us to. Don't drink your Ovaltine, kids. It's time to put it back in the fridge. Actually, you're better off just throwing it in the trash. This shit's nasty. Merry Trashmas, everyone! Hey, it's me, the disembodied voice of Funkle-a-Munkle, no longer shackled by physical form. What sins will I commit now? Thank you so much for watching, and I really do mean that. This video has been in production for over a year now. I originally wrote the script back in December of 2018 with plans to finish the video by January of 2019. That's why there were some jokes and references that were a bit dated. This was supposed to be done like a year ago, but then my mom passed away and I just stopped like halfway through production, and this video has just represented my failure as a human being for like a year. So as much as I'd like to go back and redo some bits of it, it's indescribable how good it feels to finally have it done. With that being said, I have some people that I would like to thank for their involvement, whether they knew it or not. For their VHS video essay that I referenced a lot, I'd like to thank H. Bomber Guy and Shannon Strucci for their hard work. I especially want to take time to point out Strucci's involvement, since I didn't in the original script, and that wasn't right of me. I want to thank Cameron for this wonderfully horrifying thumbnail. Cameron has been a good friend of mine for a couple of years now, and he just knocked this one out of the park. He's trying to build a career on art commissions right now, so you can see a link in the description to contact him if you're interested in that. Lastly, I want to thank Nick Mantis and point you to the link in the description for shepdocumentary.com. I took a couple of good-natured jabs at Nick over the course of the video, but I really can't stress enough how much his work contributed to this project. I never would have gained the new appreciation for Gene Shepard that I now have if Mr. Mantis hadn't taken the time to create this loving tribute to him. And Mr. Mantis, if you're watching this, I meant what I said. If you are looking for help with this project, contact me. I would love to help in any way that I can. And hopefully you're not too mad that I played the funny laughing Woody sound at your failed Kickstarter. Don't worry, you can't hate me any more than I hate myself. Alright, that's all for now. I gotta bounce. I think there's a drone outside my window. Look out for more videos from me. Now that my life is a bit more stable, I'm gonna try and put out a video every month or so. So be sure to subscribe and ding that dang old bell to satisfy Papa YouTube's ever gaping maw. Merry Crumbus and birds aren't real.
And in case you didn't hear, oh by golly, have a holly jolly Christmas this year.
Wait till you see the